All right, now it's my turn. My first presentation is Introduction to I/O All, which is a module on CPAN. I tend to use anytime I'm doing a lot of I/O in a given program. If I'm, just doing a quick read of a file, I won't necessarily use it. But if I'm doing quite a bit of I/O processing, then it's really handy. Basically, it's a unified interface to all that list of modules. I'm not going to read all of them, but okay, thanks. But, basically you may recognize a lot of these or may have used some of them before: I/O file, I/O dir. And it gives you a common interface to all of those underlying modules. And it just does a lot of really convenient things. The best way is to see some examples. So if you just want to create an I/O object, you just say my I/O equals I/O, and then, the path, the fully qualified path, or, / whatever it is, whatever it takes. If you're in the same directory as that file, you can just specify the file. But basically the same thing you would pass to open if you were using open to open a file. All right. Then it does a lot of different things based on context, and there are a lot of different methods you can call depending on what type of object it is. So in this case, we're dealing with a file. Slurping is, historically been kind of a pain because you usually have to put it in a block and do a local and, put it into slurp mode and all of that. Here, that's all you have to do. It basically overloads the greater than and less than signs so that you can use it going either direction. But boom, IO file.txt into contents. Now you've got the contents of that file in a scalar. If you wanted to do it into an array, here's another way of doing it, is you can actually explicitly say slurp. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. You can either do it implicitly like in the first case, or explicitly by calling the slurp. And like I said, it figures out by context what you're trying to do with the object. So if you want to print to a file, you just go the other way around. You notice my variable is swapped now with my I/O object. So you just say whatever's in the scalar, send it to the file. Appending to the file, double arrows. Append to the string, going the other way, is, basically, again, just overloading of those operators. Yes?
Real quick, where you have IO file text, everything that can all be replaced with $IO?
Yes, exactly. If you do that first step first, then yes, you wouldn't have to explicitly type that out every time. I was just doing it different ways so you can see different ways of doing it. But yes, normally that's what you would do, is create an IO object and then do all your operations on it. So, good question. All right. Copying a file also is sometimes kind of a pain without. I know there are other modules that allow you to do it, but that's what's nice about I/O All, is you just pull in one module and it gives you all these different things you can do. So that's all you've got to do. Or again, you can create two different I/O objects and then just say what this one to the other one. You can get all kinds of metadata information off of the object. So here, if you've got an I/O object and you ask it for its name, it's going to print the full path name of the file. Or you can, it does overloading on the double quotes. So if you just put it in double quotes, it gives you the same thing. All right. If you want to get all files and directories, and now I/O is a directory object, not a file object. So let's pretend somewhere up here, when I created the object, I said my $IO equals, and then I give it a directory name rather than a file name. If I call all on that, it gets, as you might expect, all the names of all the files and all the directories that are in that directory. That makes sense so far? Okay. The next one, you can do pass parameters to all. If you want to go an arbitrary number of levels deep. I can specify 3. It'll only go 3 levels deep, no deeper than that, and give you a list of all the files and directories that are in there.
In each level, down to the 3rd level?
Down to the third level.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, down to the 3rd level. And that's basically telling it where to stop. That's your maximum depth. But if you specify all with a 0, that means give me everything, recurse all the way through. Or if you use the capital A on the all, that does the same thing. It says, give me everything, go through the directories. And again, I used to do this kind of stuff with file find, but you know, this is just a much easier to use interface because you don't have to create your callback subroutine, which, you know, figures out what you want to do with it. You can just loop through the stuff, use it as an iterator, and then do each operation on each object. Because when they come back, those are not just names, those are actually each individual I/O objects of each thing. So it's not just the name, it's just when you use it in just as a scalar in double quotes or whatever, it acts like it's a name. So I'll give you a few specific examples of some programs that I wrote recently. I'll have to give a little backstory, I guess, to explain why I did this. Okay, basically the reason that I wrote these programs was that I was upgrading Linux. I discovered that the GNOME team decided to leave out a feature that I used to use, which is being able to save a session. Now, not every program obeyed sessions, and that's why they removed the feature, but the thing that I cared about that did actually obey the session were terminals. I had terminals set up exactly the way I wanted, so when I booted into Linux, all my terminals were on all my desktops set up exactly the way I wanted them. Well, now I couldn't do that anymore, so I had to, of course, find some other way of doing it. Did a lot of searching around, didn't find a real good way of doing it, so I was like, oh, well, I'm a programmer, so I'll fix it. So I decided that I would fix this. In the process, I also decided that I didn't really need compiz anymore, which is one of the fancy window manager that gives you all the wobbly windows and all that fancy stuff, gives you the cube when you switch desktops. That if I use Metacity, the only thing I didn't like about it was that when you have 4 desktops and you're switching between the desktops, when you reach the end, it doesn't wrap around to the first desktop. It stops at the last one, and it stops at the first one. And again, I was like, well, this is kind of annoying, but hey, I can fix it. So this is what I did. So first I'll go through the desktop switching programs so we could see those. We can make this nice and big. Okay, well, first what I did is I created a module that is WM control for window manager control. There is actually a module on CPAN that does this, but it didn't look to me like it was actively maintained. I installed it and it seemed pretty broken at the time. So I just basically ended up rewriting it because, hey, I got a presentation out of it too. So first you just, and we'll look at the module later to see what it's doing. For now, just understand it tells the window manager to do stuff. So we get a new window manager control object. We ask it for the current desktop number because they're all numbered. We ask for the first desktop number and the last desktop number. And then basically we just keep looking for if the current desktop is equal to the first desktop, and the name of this program again was switch desktop left. So that means you're going backwards, or this way for, I guess, you people watching. So when it hits the first desktop, you want it to wrap around to the last desktop. So that's all I do. Otherwise, I just take the current desktop and subtract 1 from it. The very last line is the thing that makes everything happen. It just says switch to the new desktop. So that's literally all I'm doing, is just keep subtracting until you hit the first, and then if you're at the first and you tell it to run one more time, it goes to the last one. Any questions on this one? Because the next one is virtually the same. I'm only going to point out the differences. So this is switch desktop right. And you can see I'm doing the same basic thing. This time I'm adding rather than subtracting. Otherwise, they're virtually identical programs. Any questions there? Basically, it just says if I hit the last desktop going to the right, then wrap around to the first one. And I will actually demonstrate this because it is actually running on my system. So I can sit here. This is going to the right. You can see I just keep going over the same screens again. This is going to the left. Same screens again, wraps around. It used to be that it would stop on either end. And of course, that was really the only reason why I like the cube. I mean, sure, the cube is cool to see it rotate, but I don't really need that, especially on my laptop where I want to use, less power, don't want all the fancy 3D stuff. And that was it. That was really the only thing that bugged me about the Metacity window manager, so I fixed that.
How are you triggering that with your keyboard?
Oh, very good question. Basically, you've got in the menus, you've got, let's see, I think it's under preferences here, keyboard shortcuts. And what I did, oh, great. This is not a window that's going to allow me to resize. I'll just scroll down and hopefully I'll see it. Disabled. Oh, sure, I don't see it now.
So it's probably, what, control left arrow and right arrow? Or?
Yeah, control alt.
Oh, okay.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I forgot it's under custom. So here's my command that it runs, which is just switch desktop right. And the other one is switch desktop left. And I just called it switch to workspace right with wrap so that I know that's what it's doing. And you see up above where the default ones are, they're both disabled. So then that way I'm taking control of the window manager and just took away the default key bindings. Make sense? Okay. Now I'll show you the first program that I talked about, which was wanting, originally I had it set up in a session so that it would always reload what I need at boot time. But I decided, since I don't have sessions anymore, I'm going to have this program run at startup and set up my terminals exactly the way I want them to be. So first, again, I create a window control object. I sleep 10. That was more or less found by experimentation. That just gives the window manager time to fully load up and make sure everything's ready to go before I start giving it commands. Then I switch to desktop 0, which is the first one. Yeah, I neglected to mention that earlier. There's 0 indexed. Big surprise there. Then I run a system command, which actually, based on what Eric just said, I'm doing this all wrong, so I have to fix this. Which actually I did know this, but this was a quick and dirty when I wrote it, and then I just haven't gone back and fixed it. So all you kids out there, this is the wrong way. I should be doing it as individual arguments. But anyways, you can call GNOME Terminal with tabs and give it a profile. The profile is basically, the way I use profiles are just the color scheme. because depending on which systems I'm SSH'd into, I want the colors to tell me that immediately. So if I'm on a dev system, it's gray on black. If I'm on a staging system, it's yellow on black. If I'm on a production system, it's red on black, because it says, hey dummy, really be careful what you're doing here. So mostly though, I don't start up with production windows open or staging ones, but I do development, and I want them certain ways on certain desktops. So that's all that command is doing, is just telling it to start up a GNOME terminal. I sleep too, just to give it time to load before I try to tell it to do things. And then I ask for the latest window, which is one of the features I added that the other CPAN module didn't have, because it seemed really useful to know what did I just launch, because that seems like the most thing you're likely to want to work with. So it gives me the latest window, which is an ID number. And I've still got some debugging stuff in here too, so you can tell this really was a quick and dirty that I need to go and fix up. But then I can change properties on that window. I get the latest window ID, and I add the property maximized vert, which means vertically maximize it. And then basically all the rest of the program is just switching through each subsequent desktop and doing the same thing. But my parameters are slightly different on my GNOME terminals, because I want them different depending on which one it is. At the very end, I switch back to desktop 0, just so I'm back at the start. I'm going to actually run this so you can see what it does. Let's see here. First of all, I'll go back to here. I'm going to maximize this just so we can tell the difference. And I'm going to go through and close all these other terminals. Yes, close window. Hopefully I've got nothing important running. If so, then shame on me. Okay. So basically what I've got is 0 has got a maximized terminal. All the rest have no terminals open. So I'm going to run my startup script, which I probably should give it a more descriptive name than that too, and so it's going to wait 10 seconds first. So we got to just sit and be patient, and then you'll see it start to do stuff. Okay, there's my first window. Boom, vertically maximized. It goes to the next one, same thing.
Now with this, you're just relying on it that it's going to open that terminal in the top left-hand corner, or can you tell it?
Oh, actually, there's a geometry thing at the end that I pass. Yeah, that I pass to GNOME terminal to tell it where to be on the screen. Yes. Okay, and you notice that we're back at 0 now. And this one, you notice all of these are just the default profile. Nothing too interesting there. But this one is where it starts getting interesting, because I always have the first two. And again, this is how I work. Other people would do this completely differently. But I've always got the first two set up for dev, for SSH, and then the rest are just defaults. Over here, the first two are set up for dev, usually for database stuff, and the rest are defaults. And then here, usually I have one here for my green. It's just a remote system, like maybe my system at home. I want to look at some code and see how I did something like that. So that way, now, even without sessions, I can always have my desktop start up exactly the way I want. And watch that. See? Scrolled again. Yes, I do get too excited about silly things like this. But anyway, we will get back to this. Now we'll actually look at the code that does all this. And I didn't realize this until Eric was doing his talk, but actually there's a slight tie-in between my talk and his, and I'll point that out when I get to it. Okay, basically I'm doing new. You notice IO all. That was the point of this whole talk. I know we got off into window manager thing, but actually the point is IO all. So new is not doing anything interesting. Initialize. This is where we're starting to do some of the IO all stuff that's kind of interesting. So I'm giving it IO command, which WM control, because what I'm actually doing is using a command line command named WM CTRL to do all of this. I'm not actually, there's not actually a Perl module that I could find that actually, you know, connects through XS into the guts of the window manager. It just runs this command line program which does everything for you. I just wrap it in object-oriented goodness so you can't tell the difference, and off you go. So you notice at the end, I do a pipe, chomp, slurp. The reason I'm doing that, the pipe is the part that ties into Eric's earlier talk, is using a pipe, you can also get standard out instead of using backticks. So I'm basically saying, give me the output of this. And you notice, again, tying into Eric's talk, I've got 2, which is standard error, going to dev null. So I don't want to see any errors. I just want to see output. Slurp is saying, hey, I want to stuff it all into the WM control parameter. And then I'm doing an exist check to see if, because I'm doing a which gives you path, right? So I'm asking it, where is this file? Stuffing it into a hash ref, and then I check, pass that to IO, and I say if it doesn't exist, then blow up, because hey, we can't do anything without this program. We depend on everything in this module is dependent on that program being present. So if you don't have it, all bets are off. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. And that was one of the other features that I didn't point out earlier, but IO all, in most cases, returns an IO object, and that way you can do method chaining with it, which in a lot of cases like that comes in quite handy. Automatically does the chomp for me, so I don't have to cut off the new line at the end. Makes it real handy. Okay, this is the method that actually executes whatever you're passing it. So now I'm doing a join on the path to WM control and any arguments that I was passed. I'm just passing those on through. So if I want it as an array, I return the output as an array. If otherwise, I return it all in a scalar, which again kind of goes back into your backticks thing where I'm simulating that, you know, scalar versus array context. So again, I'm doing pipe, chomp, slurp into an array, and IO is smart enough to figure out, hey, since I'm in array context, I'm going to give you each line of output as a separate piece of information in the array. Otherwise, you notice that I'm not doing a chomp, and I'm just stuffing it all into, I'm just slurping it basically into this variable. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm going to run long. Okay. Window Manager, I'm not going to go through all these because they're very repetitive after a while. They all do basically the same thing. It calls execute WM CTRL with a -m option. What that -m option does is gives you information about the window manager. That's really not even one of the most interesting ones. Desktops gives you a bunch of information, desktop number, current desktop, desktop geometry, all of that stuff in that regular expression, because I'm parsing the output of a command line argument. But you notice how nice that IO all makes all this. it really kind of encapsulates it and wraps up the messiness of dealing with an external program and makes it so you just deal with whatever the output is and do something with it. So, current desktop, we saw that earlier. First desktop goes through an array. And actually, at this point, unless anybody's got any specific questions about any of these methods, I'll probably just move on to my next talk, because it's more of the same, just passing different parameters to it. It executes, I get the output, I parse it, I return the information in the object. That's about it. Is that good for everybody? Okay, cool. We'll move on, and hopefully I won't run too much over time.